These are techniques for supercharging your oral memory. If you came from my Melody Memory Challenge, you might be wondering how it's possible to remember such a long melody. Well, I'm going to show you. And by the end of this video, you're going to have the tools to easily remember that melody, and with some practice, much longer ones, even at first listen. These techniques also enhance our experience and understanding of the melodies we apply them to. So let's look at the 25-note melody from the Memory Challenge. What might sound like an undifferentiated flurry of notes is actually full of symmetry, patterns, and larger structures that can help us find order. Let's start at the beginning. Whole step, half step. These first three notes are the opening gambit of minor. And since so many melodies are made up of conjunct, stepwise motion like this, it makes sense to have a mental repository of all the possible permutations. Whole step, major. Half step, whole step. Phrygian. Half step, chromatic. By recognizing these spans, you transform three notes into a single chunk, tripling your memory capacity. Actually, we can usually do much better than that. Indeed, even here, there's a good reason to be thinking in larger chunks, because as is so often the case in melodies, there's a self-referential quotation, the first four-note melodic span, simply occurs again verbatim, up a fourth. You can think of this as 6, 7, 1, 3, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 individual things to remember. Or you can see this as one shape, this Tetris piece of a melody, one thing to remember, that gets moved around. This device of repeating a melodic idea up or down is called sequence, and once you begin to recognize it, you'll see it everywhere. The next bit of the melody, minor third plus whole step, is a common fragment of the pentatonic scale. Indeed, many melodies are made up entirely of pentatonic fragments, just like this. And because they're so ubiquitous, you need to be able to recognize these. A good place to start are the three-note conjunct pentatonic chunks: minor third whole step, minor third, and step, step. The last of which is redundant with the major scale fragment we already talked about. In the fullness of time, you'll want to memorize all the four-note spans, tumbles, and other leapy, diagonal ways around the pentatonic scale, too. The goal, of course, is a broad vocabulary of common melodic shapes. So rather than one note at a time, you can be thinking in larger structures, using your memory more efficiently, and also engaging more directly with what the notes really mean. Back to the melody at hand and our pentatonic chunk. We see the next three notes. Same pentatonic chunk, down a step, sequence. As we move forward, this is outlining a major ninth chord. So many melodies trace the shape of a chord simply linearly, like this, or in more broken fashion. But whatever the case, recognizing and hearing harmonies as a single melodic unit is an incredibly economical way to store melody in your mind. You can sometimes condense a dozen or more notes down to a chord or two. But it's not just economy. Again, it also makes you implicitly aware of the harmonic intention at that moment. Just one more reason you really want to know all of your chords. If you want help learning them, their makeup, sound, and function, check out my complete guide to chords. Okay, at the top of the major ninth, melody does an about face and walks stepwise. A 4-note span like this is called a tetrachord. This one happens to be a descending minor tetrachord. Of course, there's a major tetrachord, upper minor, and Lydian. These are the 4 tetrachords that occur diatonically. I made a whole video on tetrachords, so if this is news to you, get yourself up to speed with that. So after this descending minor tetrachord, we see this figure. Neighbor tone. Leave a note and return to it, moving stepwise in both directions. Neighbor group. Escape tone. Appoggiatura, among others, are little melodic constellations, and training your mind to recognize the shapes will allow them to become a single unit in your mind. Okay, final note. 6. We end on the same note we began, but up the octave. You always want to be tracking where a melody begins and where it ends, along with the other information you've clocked. This can tell you a lot about what's happening musically. Are we opening a phrase group? Is this closing material? Are we modulating? It's part of becoming an active listener, an analytical one, training your mind to be a participant in what you're hearing rather than a passive receiver. Okay, let's put the whole melody together, not as 25 individual notes, but instead as just 5 simple structures. The opening melodic chunk, which, by the way, is just a minor add 2 chord. And again, moved by sequence. Pentatonic chunk, leap step. Again, moved by sequence. And climbing straight up a major ninth. Walk down the minor tetrachord. Descending neighbor tone figure from 1. And we end on our starting note, 6. And that's it. That's the entire 25-note melody. Pretty simple when broken down like this. Can you remember 5 things? Of course you can. And the key is learning the vocabulary that allows you to recognize these structures and to practice hearing them. And that's all for now. I'm Sahir Gold. I'll see you next time.